What really makes an iron powerful? Is it the so-called technology that we keep getting told about? Or the evident de-lofting, which we all know about? Or maybe it's something completely different, and depending on what type of golfer you are, depends on which one of these 300-pound set of irons would be extremely powerful for yourself. Guys, how you doing? Welcome back to a brand new video. Simon here, SAS Golf Academy, where I do all my in-person teaching as well as second-hand club fitting. And there's a reason why I have this particular 7-iron, 7 hybrid in my hand. And it's because I want to dissect the myth that is power. Powerful irons, and realistically why too much power could be a bad thing, not enough power could also be a bad thing, and how you're going to decide with a 300-pound budget, and I've got 4 very good options. Sadly, these 11 clubs don't fit in that. And mind you, second-hand, they might be around 300 pounds. Anyway, this is at one end of the spectrum. And what I want to talk about today is, yes, de-lofting, which we all know about, but then also head type. How does that balance work? And therefore, that balance of head design and static loft on the head affects dynamic loft, affects spin loft. You put dynamic loft and spin loft in the same sentence and add a tiny bit of ball speed, all of a sudden we equal power. And it's why I have this 31-degree 11 hybrid. That's gone a bit to the right, I must say. Hang on, give me a sec. Let's hit one straight. There she is. And I would deem this a very powerful club, but for who exactly? Now, interestingly, as we go through this video, we're going to pay very close attention to this number here, to this number here, and how it affects my overall carry distance, but also this number. A number that doesn't really get talked about a lot in golf, especially when it comes to irons. Yes, we want loads of carry. Go on, get down there. Do we have the ability to stop the ball on the green? And typically, anything above 43 to 44 degrees has a good chance of stopping on the green. Now, some of you probably don't have an issue with stopping the ball on the green, but want an extra few yards. Well, good, because my list of clubs is definitely going to cater to that. However, I'm not surprised that these hybrid irons, or even the 11 clubs, but other hybrid irons, have been growing in popularity over the last decade or so, because ball speed helps increase launch. It helps increase spin. I'll explain how head design and loft affects that as well. But if you've had surgery, injuries, got older, less flexibility, but you still need the ball up in the air, well, I can see why these are revered, why these are helping those kind of golfers. Because that descent angle, that height, that spin, to just get it up in the air, that's pretty much perfect, that can be helped by head design and loft. Not special metals, not infused or injected into whatever orifice that this club has, just raw ballistics and physics. Now, to be fair, I swung at 75 miles an hour, which is still a bit fast, I would say, to actually have this club in the bag just yet. Anything under 70 miles an hour, especially 65 miles an hour with a 7-iron, I would certainly think about this club, or at least have some irons at the bottom end of the bag, but maybe a 7 hybrid, 6 hybrid, 7 wood, etc. But let's move on to our next competitor, because as you see through this list, this launch is going to drop, the spin's going to drop, and not necessarily the loft is going to drop. In certain cases, it is. But realistically, head design also plays a big part in terms of dynamic loft and spin loft. So here's the first club through our list, 2016, the PGA series, around 300 pounds. As I say, all my irons today go for around 300 pounds second hand, some newer ones, some more underrated ones, and why they all kind of jostle for that power metric. However, one thing we haven't talked about when it comes to power, and obviously affecting your dynamic loft, spin loft efficiency, is obviously technique, which is a great time to mention the sponsor of this video. Because as much as I love to talk about the great value of secondhand equipment, technique is king in this game. And potentially a lot of you guys don't have the time to have in-person tuition, which is why I want to tell you about this great app, Swingtweaks. It's a super easy app to use. All you have to do is film your swing from 2 angles. One, down the line, the other being face on. And then a real PGA professional will give you back your full video analysis, marked up, narrated, as well as giving you drills to work on to fix your swing. But wait, there's more, because you now get a 3-week custom practice plan included, as they understand how important efficient practice really is. Not to mention, you have your own curated FAQ section, just so you have a full understanding of what the coach is trying to get you to do, as there's nothing worse than not understanding what you're trying to fix at the driving range. If you're interested and you want 20% off your first swing tweak, use code SAS Golf. I'll leave the links in description. I think we've got to leave the G Series one there. I can't hit it much better than that, to be perfectly honest. And therefore, let's note some of my numbers right from the start and why I think ping has been so popular for so long. I always said with ping when I came to club fitting with it, is that it is the one brand that kind of built clubs for the amateur golfer, not just their tour pros, not just the drivers that can go 350 yards, just stuff that's easy to use. And me getting this kind of spin with this particular club, head design and loft is actually very good. I almost understand why one of my coaches back in the day wanted to put ping G10s back in the bag, even though he swung fast, because actually it makes sense with these kind of numbers. So let's bring in our second club for today, the Taylormade M1 2017, again at 30.5 degrees loft. Again, like the other clubs, I've got this in a very high trajectory kind of shaft. Typically, you can't see it there, even though I said I won't talk about shafts that much, the lighter the shaft, typically, the higher launching it will be and the higher the torque, meaning it will close this face more. If you struggle with shots to the right, get something light, get something weak in flex. Now, for a lot of you watching, you won't know, because obviously it's quite old and if you're just starting the game. However, the M1 was more of the player's version of these cavity back irons. They had an M2, which is 28.5 degrees loft. However, the reason I like this M1 is it's still forgiving, it's still powerful, but it's not as offset as, let's say, the Ping G Series. The G Series is great for, let's say, that big slice off-center shots, and so is this. Don't get me wrong, they're not that far apart. However, for me, it looks a bit less chunky behind the ball, a bit less offset. So if you're that player that's getting, let's say, a bit older, wanting a bit more power, but don't necessarily want big chunky behind the ball, and don't get me wrong, this is still quite chunky. Why I chose the M1 to be next in this list is, yes, these are all powerful irons. Doesn't mean they all have to look and feel the same though. The other side of it, and I'm hoping to put some repeatable swings on this, because obviously I'm talking and filming and et cetera, oh, I do need to change the color code actually, is yes, the shafts are a bit different, and again, we're gonna have to put that to one side. However, head design, loft, especially on the head, also play a part when it comes to spin loft, dynamic loft, and efficiency, which is good because I've got another club with the same shaft as this in a minute to prove my point. 93.2, what's our spin there? That's gone a bit left, however, so I don't think I can count that. However, we're now in the 3,900. Again, that's gone the same distance as the well-struck Ping G Series that I just had a minute ago. That's nice. That's well hit. 93.1 efficiency, very good. 5,000, launch 16.3. And it's good because I just want you to see these steady increments in lower launch, lower spin. Not massive, these aren't massively far apart. And to be honest, it's what I try and show so many of my lessons. Don't think one set's gonna drop 5 shots off your round against another. It just doesn't happen. Brands make very similar pieces of equipment to each other because they want to cater to all markets. Okay, I deleted my hook with the Taylormade M2 just so the numbers are consistent. However, this is how important launch and spin are. Somehow, for some reason, I wasn't trying, with the Taylormade, I wasn't swinging as fast. No particular reason, it's just the way the club felt when I was holding it. However, the launch on average is lower, 17.6 against the Ping, 18.5. The spin is much lower. We're getting to this tip-off point, anything below 4,000, by the way, very dangerous territory of never staying up in the air, versus 5,600. So we've got less ball speed on average, almost 3 miles an hour, yet we've got more carry distance. This here is what power can be considered. That being said, as I showed, as soon as we get to this 4,000 mark, it starts dropping. Look at our descent angle. If all of a sudden we start getting to 3.8, 3.7, 3.5, this is never stopping on the green. I am holding three 30.5 degree heads now, all across different years. One, however, looks more like the 11 hybrid. One looks in the middle. One, a lot of beginners feel like that this is almost a blade, and when you compare it to, let's say, these two, I'm certainly not surprised. However, these hollow back heads is that the center of gravity, even though, let's be honest, these are all 30.5, the further back the CG, so the hybrids over here, the CG would be miles away from the face. The CG would be miles away from the G series, slightly further away from the M1. The further the CG is back, i.e. here, a 7 wood, 5 wood, the more it pulls on the shaft, the more it wants to add dynamic loft, which increases our spin. And depending on your speed, that can be a good or bad thing. These 30.5 for this particular head style with the CG so close, but obviously tons of weight. We've got tungsten in here, technology. Don't get me wrong. This is one of the best irons that ever be invented. No wonder so many amateur golfers have incredible power with this golf club. Which brings us on to our next pick, the Cleveland underrated UHX utility hybrid launching iron, whatever you want to call it. We're now at 30 degrees and I'll leave some prices down the right-hand side. Now, this is definitely chunkier than the P790. There's no question about that. But testing hybrid irons, especially the way that you can hit them quite high off the face, tend to drop the spin quite low, just in my personal opinion. This is a lot more offset and a lot more chunky than I should say than the M1, which is potentially why I've just snapped that straight left. I mean, it's gone a mile left, but it certainly isn't the direction I want it. That's a bit more like it. 96.3, 4,600, launch 16.4. I must state at this point that I launch the ball too low for my speed. I spin it too low, even with blades. That's on me, that's technique. I refer back to Swingtweaks and lessons. However, as we're going through this list, I want you to look at your swing. Do you spin the ball too much? Do you know your 7-iron spins at 7,000? If it does, more of these de-lofted, powerful irons with the CG close to the face are going to give you more distance. Because like that Ping G series, I loved it, my consistency was very good, but the launch is so high. Like if I'm hitting that into wind, nowhere it's going to come back at me. So I'd have the opposite problem. I'd probably go more to the M1, for example. Not as offset, doesn't launch and balloon into the air, but I still had 45 degrees worth of descent angle. This bad boy, on the other hand, just carried 204 yards. And even though I swung this faster, Jesus, that's jumped out of the pack. The spin, and bearing in mind, you swing something faster, you should be getting more spin and more launch. This is producing less launch and less spin. She will be gone, 94.1. I've got efficiency of 1.43 there, which is just ridiculous. And I appreciate I'm hitting quite slingy draws today. Just notice when it comes to efficiency, and one of the tricks I must say when it comes to ball speed increase is that we get very little efficiency, ball speed, from a wedge. Why? Because the ball just runs along the face. There's nothing to compress it. Versus a driver, 1.5. Of course we're going to get high efficiency. So when we're getting these de-lofted irons, not just de-lofted irons, but de-lofted irons with the CG at the face, like this is basically superficial back here. There's going to be nothing here. There's still going to be tons of weight at the bottom, at the face. This is more for aesthetics, if anything. Yes, it's a 30-degree 7-iron, but it's a jacked up 30-degree 7-iron, meaning the dynamic loft evidently is going to be stronger, reducing my spin loft, but more importantly, increasing my efficiency. Now, obviously I'm not a robot, but let's look at the efficiency, which is important, because yes, I've swung these all kind of different, especially speed-wise. In to out massively as well for some reason. Angle attack, relatively similar. But look at the utility Cleveland iron. 1.4, that is jacked up. That's almost a hybrid in my hands. However, we're playing with fire here now, guys. And again, these won't be your numbers, but I want you to see how loft and head design works. 18.5, 5,600, potentially too high a flight for me. Taylormade M1, coming down, decent launch angle, decent spin with a kind of a hot one in there, hence why the P790 kind of also gets its characteristic of being quite hot, some certain hot shots. Now we're playing with fire. 4,000, 4,600, 4,500, which brings me on to my 5-iron. I mean, Wilson Staff D9. Now, evidently, this does look more like a cavity back. And again, manufacturers are playing about with that dynamic loft as well as hybrid head design or CG closer to the face or further away. This D9 is incredibly strong lofted at 27 degrees. We've jumped another 3 degrees now altogether, yet has this kind of hybrid-esque cavity back, weight down low behind it. Again, my whole thing today is talk about dynamic loft, ways you can affect that. Again, head design, CG further back, increase it. De-loft it, that's going to obviously counteract that. I'll show you some prices on the right-hand side. This Wilson D9 is a monster. It's got the same shaft in it, by the way, as my Taylormade M1. So we've got the KBS Ultralight Reg Flex, 85 gram. And if you launch the ball high, spin the ball a lot, I mean, this is offset, this is forgiving, this is powerful, this is everything you could possibly want. And I fatted it. I fatted it and it's probably gone just as far as the others. Spin 2,200. That's driving up. That has gone as far. That has literally gone as far. Somehow I fatted it at 96 miles an hour. That is driver numbers. That's a descent angle of 20 degrees. Look at that. Unbelievable. And to be perfectly honest, one of the reasons why these irons are so popular. And by no means am I saying this is a bad club. So many people I see in the comment sections nowadays go, de-lofted irons, ruining the game. That's not a 7-iron. There's a reason for them. We need the forgiveness when we start this game. Technology has moved on. I am all for de-lofted forgiving irons, but I want you to see the downsides. If I can find the middle of the face, that is. And it's the fact that that low spin at high speeds, or let's say offset like this, means incredible distance forward that can't stop on a green, but also incredible distance offline when my face is open or closed. I mean, this is driver efficiency numbers, 1.44, launch 14.7, backspin 4.1, and I'm not surprised because in my hand at the moment, this is very much a driver. Before you go, watch me manipulate this with technique. Let's come over the top. Let's cast the club with a very open face. And this 6-iron in my hand or 5-iron in my hand all of a sudden turns back to a 7-iron with the appropriate numbers. Numbers that actually a beginner golfer would be quite happy with. Why? Because my technique has just changed. The dynamic loft, the spin loft, the efficiency. I have now come out to in. I have now added loft. We're back to this Ping G series kind of numbers. Why? Because my technique changed. I hit almost a bunker shot style there. Again, look the stark contrast in terms of launch and spin with my draw swing, closed club face, de-lofting it. And actually, look at this one. Descent angle, 48.9, 180 yards in terms of total distance. And I guarantee a beginner coming over the top at 90 miles an hour, hit one like that with this club right here, they would go, right, sign me up. How much do they cost? Again, thank you to the guys at Swingtweaks for obviously sponsoring the video. I'll catch you guys in the next one.